So I wish you could see this and be here. I'm in London. I'm just walking back from the Natural History Museum, which was started by Charles Darwin. And there's all sorts of really cool things in there. There's the dodo bird. There is like a giant blue whale. There's dinosaurs. It's a pretty remarkable place of different kinds of species of things that you would never imagine existed, right? And the idea of evolution is deeply intertwined with many of the discussions that we have. It's really important. Sort of discussions of competition and business. It's really important, obviously, within the natural world. And it's also, really important in terms of culture. And there's lots of discussions about evolution. And it's really a simple process, right? You have randomization of some set of a population, and then there is a selection procedure to select upon the sort of most fittest within that particular environment. And from there, those particular ones, those most fittest ones, they replicate of some degree at random. And then after that, they go into another cycle, and that repeats over and over and over again. That explains all sorts of, natural world and human behavior, and like just a lot of stuff. But I was having this really interesting conversation with quite a remarkable intellectual, and the conversation was really going in an evolutionary perspective and about human behavior and business. But I have deep reserves about the sort of evolutionary perspective that ultimately we want to go back to become like what we were in the natural world, that we need to come back to becoming more natural, whatever that natural thing is, right? And that's that's deeply intertwined with sort of natural selection being applied to human beings. I have really deep reserves in terms of the ethical implications of that, in terms of what has happened over the years. For those of you who don't know, much of the early 20th century discussion of human behavior was really focused on evolution, and really led us into some really nasty eugenics movements, right? For example. So I'm really cautious about that. But then the other thing is, we use technology. We set up the world such that those evolutionary pressures are not necessarily all that important, right? So there's a reason, for example, that we might have cultural changes that are going on that might not appear evolutionary, right? Like, I don't go around beating up other males that are smaller than me, for example, right? Like, the sort of evolutionary perspective would suggest that is somewhat a natural thing to do. But I feel uneasy about that, simply because in this day and age, we have to balance ethical considerations, moral considerations, value considerations, purpose considerations against this particular backdrop, right? So we can do a lot more as human beings culturally by observing the natural world, but as well not necessarily pressing our agenda, but being a kinder, gentler, more humanitarian world than what we could possibly have if we simply abide by a strict evolutionary perspective. For example, being a much more open and inclusive culture. So what we're facing with this is that we have maybe perhaps evolutionary trends in certain directions, but then if you look at the success of cultures and the success of just human beings, right? Like that thrive. They're actually really open, and they mutate a lot more and combine a lot more than perhaps follow a sort of a selection procedure, right? So I'm thinking of language, for example. Part of the reason that, if you were to apply an evolutionary perspective to language, you would sort of suggest that there would be a dominant language eventually. But what we're recognizing is that there's niches that pop up, and these niches are really positive for, just variety and diversity. And so we don't want to lose some of those languages. So we have to battle and think about those particular dimensions and get you to sort of think in an interesting way. But at the same time, we have to be cognizant of what that means, and what we can possibly do with the world around us, right? And I think that's the sort of overlying this, the sort of natural explanations, right? We hear these natural explanations all the time. Eat naturally. You want to become like the cave person, basically, right? And those explanations can only explain so much. One of them I was thinking about earlier today with teeth brushing, right? People didn't understand that teeth brushing was actually, a good thing to do. And in fact, it's not natural to brush your teeth, right? To have a stick with the technology, this technology with bristles. And yet we do that because we know that is a positive thing. And there's all sorts of things that are like that. And we have to be cognizant of what this means for culture, for human beings. It's not a direct evolutionary sort of going back to nature perspective, is what I'm saying. There's hints to who we are, but it would be hard pressed for me to argue that my life would be better off if, I didn't have the clothing that I have now, or I didn't have the transportation that I didn't have now, which are completely contradictory to sort of evolutionary ideas and the sort of going back to nature ideas. So I just think we need to be more cognizant of that. And that's why I have deep, I do have an appreciation of it. It was a very amazing experience to see some of these things in the Natural History Museum, but then as well, we need to be cognizant of the counter side, right? And beside the Natural History Museum, they have the Museum of Science, or the Science Museum. And science technology is as critical piece of the puzzle as the nature of being natural, for example. So with that, I want to sort of leave that discussion aside. It's a complicated discussion, and there has all sorts of implications of it, and I think we just need to be cognizant, thoughtful about what it means and the implications of it. And the more that we're careful of it, and more that we realize and study that yes, there are some interesting evolutionary trajectories that we do see, but at the same time, we have control over these trajectories, and we can guide them. This is called an endogenous process, where we can guide and control, perhaps outside of our control, perhaps within a bit of our control, but we need to think about that, of what it means for society and business and organizations. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.